Hello, I'm Zizi with the Northwest Conservation District, and today I'm going to walk you through what is a watershed. So let's get into it. Here's our plan for today. We're going to look at some helpful definitions, think about the big picture of watershed, then zoom into the inner workings of watersheds. After figuring out what one is, we're going to ask ourselves, why should we care? It's important to see how watersheds can affect you, but more importantly, how you affect your own watershed, and that will lead us into what we can do to keep it healthy. Let's get started with our definitions. You could screenshot this diagram, which will help you when we talk about the various definitions surrounding watersheds. So starting from the bottom right, we have surface runoff from homes, factories, businesses, and we have a tributary, which is just a freshwater stream that feeds into a larger stream or river, precipitation, which is rain that contributes to surface runoff, groundwater, which is the water well in the ground that fills space between soil, sand, and rock underneath Earth's surface. And finally, we have the watershed boundary, which is a natural partition created by ridges, hills, or mountains that dictate the flow direction of water. When rain falls or snow melts, the water travels over the land surface and through the ground. This moves towards our lower elevations into streams and rivers, ultimately discharging into a larger water body. But what really is a watershed? It's the area of land where all the water that falls on it, whether rain, snow, or sleet, drains downhill to a common outlet, such as a stream, river, lake, or ocean. But remember how we talked about precipitation contributing to surface runoff? Well, some things that the water help move are point source and non-point source pollutants. Non-point source pollutants are pollutants such as motor oil leaked on parking lots, plastic grocery bags, pesticides, fertilizers, detergents, and sediments. So when it does rain or sleet, these pollutants are moved towards the larger body of water in that area. But there are also point source pollutants, which go directly into that larger body. You can think of factory spills. You can also think of watersheds in the form of a shower and a tub. So here's the water from the shower head coming onto our land, so rain, and then it drains out through the faucet below. So let's get into it. There are watersheds everywhere. In fact, no matter where you are in the world, you're in a watershed. But let's think about Connecticut for now. Every drop of water used and that flows in Connecticut drains into the Long Island Sound. That seems crazy, doesn't it? But let's think back to the water cycle. You've probably seen this before, but let's discuss it again. We begin with condensation. This happens high up in the atmosphere when warm air rises, cools down, and the water vapor turns it into liquid droplets. These droplets gather to form clouds. Once the clouds become heavy with moisture, the water falls back to the earth as precipitation. That could be rain, snow, sleet, or hail, depending on the temperature and conditions. After it hits the ground, the water either soaks into the soil, what we call infiltration, or it flows over the surface as runoff, which both make its way into rivers, lakes, and oceans. Some of that infiltrated water is absorbed by plant roots. Plants use the water to grow and carry out photosynthesis. Here's where we get evapotranspiration. Evapotranspiration is a combination of two things. First, evaporation, which is water turning into vapor from surfaces like soil, lakes, and oceans. And second, transpiration, which is when water vapor is released from tiny openings in plant leaves. Together, these two processes move water back into the atmosphere. Finally, we have more evaporation. The sun's heat continues to turn surface water into vapor, sending it back into the atmosphere. The vapor rises, cools again, and condenses, restarting the cycle. Here in Torrington, where my little blue dot is, and where the Northwest Conservation District office is, we're in the Northfield Brook Naugatuck River watershed. But how does our water, like all of Connecticut's water, end up in the Long Island Sound? Well, we are situated in a water basin, HUC 12, or Hydrologic Unit Code 12, which is a system for delineating number drainage sets, also known as watersheds. Across the US, we have these numbering systems. Even though 12 is a big number, it represents the smallest level of delineation. The next biggest basin we sit in is a HUC 10, then 8. The Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, or DEEP, has classifications for them as well, with names which can be a bit easier to understand. So the smallest basin we sit in is the local basin, which is labeled with the code 6900-01, and our local basin sits in the Naugatuck River Subregional Drainage Basin. The subregional drainage basin sits in the Naugatuck Regional Drainage Basin, which sits in the Housatonic Major Drainage Basin. But how is this water ending up in the Long Island Sound? How does the water move? Elevation is the leading force of that. On this map, on the left, we see contour lines, which joins equal points of elevation or height above a given level. These similar elevations are what give us our watersheds, or drainage basins, because each basin tells us where the water moves to. And the blue star is where our office is in Torrington. Where the water moves to is described by outlet direction, which is the point on the surface at which the water flows out of an area. Here is a zoomed in diagram. Water from higher elevation flows to lower elevations. When the contour lines are closer together, the elevation is steeper and the water typically moves faster. As you can see here at the top of this image, water from 800 meters goes down to 600 meters and into a body of water called Mountain Brook. Lower in the image, we see water from 1020 meters moves down to 820 into that same body of water. It's important to note that, like this image, water doesn't always move from north to south or east to west. In Torrington's watershed, all of the water flows to the Housatonic River and then into the Long Island Sound, where all of Connecticut's water eventually goes. This happens because of the contour lines and ridges that separate our basin into the Housatonic Major Basin. There are other major basins in Connecticut as well, and they all drain into the Long Island Sound. Here's a simplified map of Connecticut's major drainage basins. It's important to note that water from Connecticut doesn't directly drain into the Long Island Sound, whether it moves through various places within its watershed and then eventually ends up in the Long Island Sound. Now let's zoom into you, a single person in Connecticut's watershed. There are so many things we do every day that have negative impacts on our watershed. Pretend you're living in this house. You have a pet, you drive a car, you wash your clothes, your car leaks oil, coolant, whatnot, and you put fertilizer on your plant to make sure they grow healthy, and you use pesticides to make sure they don't die from other pests, and your dog poops on your lawn and you forget to pick it up. But then it rains and all of that stuff goes into the sewer drain, which all leads out into our water. This is water many organisms live in, many organisms drink from, and water we drink from. But why should we care? Well, when harmful chemicals from daily items we use, like our detergents, increase nutrients from pet poop, CO2 from cars, and more, it affects so many different facets of life. Nutrient pollution is the primary cause of dead zones created by humans. Dead zones happen where there's less oxygen dissolved in the water. It's when excess nutrients that run off land are piped as wastewater into rivers and coasts that can simulate an overgrowth of algae. This algae then sinks and decomposes in the water. The decomposition process consumes oxygen and depletes the supply available to healthy marine life. This causes the marine life to die, called dead zones. Contaminated drinking water can be caused by many different factors, but some of the human-caused ones are fertilizers, pesticides, and other chemicals that are applied to land near the water. No one wants to drink contaminated drinking water. It can cause a range of illnesses from mild gastrointestinal issues to severe diseases like cholera and typhoid. So the last one I'll discuss is agriculture. If we aren't treating our crops right, we aren't treating our water right. Chemicals used on farms to help the crops grow big and healthy runs off into nearby streams and affects our waterways. But not only that, harmful chemicals affect the animals on the farms too. And if we eat those animals and those crops, it affects us. Transport of excess nutrients from things like dairy cow manure is influenced by the agricultural practices, such as methods of tillage and drainage, and the timing of application of manure and runoff events like storms and snowmelts. So it's important to do these practices at proper times to have a smaller negative impact on our waters. But what can you do every day to limit your negative impact on the watershed? Well, you can limit the use of fertilizer in your lawn or garden, keep litter out of your yard, and leave no trace when visiting lakes or streams. You could also reduce water usage during times of drought, or even just generally using less water by taking less time in the shower or turning off the faucet often when brushing your teeth. All of that goes a long way. You can take a screenshot of this and refer back to it every once in a while and see what changes you can make to protect your watershed. Remember that you aren't just affecting the water, but yourself and the others around you. It's the water we drink every day, the wildlife we interact with, the meat we eat, and the plants and crops we eat. The biggest thing you can do, if nothing else, is stay informed. You should ask questions, do research, and see where your local watershed is and how you can keep it healthy. A place you can start to do your research is the Long Island Sound Futures Fund. The EPA, New York, and Connecticut form the Long Island Sound Partnership, which grants funds for many watershed-based projects that help keep the sound healthy. Florence Farm in East Canaan, Connecticut was a recipient of that grant and was able to create a 1.3 million gallon waste storage tank for its dairy cows to reduce the agricultural runoff and nutrient pollution to the Long Island Sound. By making this manure storage tank, they were able to collect the manure and be able to use it at certain times of the year. You can take a look at some of the projects they have done if you scan this QR code. You can even search up LISFF and take a look at all of the projects. Thank you for listening to my watershed presentation, and if you have any questions about what you can do, you can always email or call us at the Northwest Conservation District, and we'd be happy to help. Thank you.